Alright, here goes nothing. So, you think it's going to be easy, and then you turn the camera on and you have to start talking. And there's people who drive by and they see you and think, what the hell is that guy doing? He looks like a weirdo. So, this is about getting over that, for one thing. But this week's module is on the topic of flow. And so I'm going to talk to you about what I've been discovering, some ideas I've been coming to understand more deeply on the topic of flow. And next week's module is on the idea of the topic of idea iteration. And that's much more of a linear, analytical sort of process. Iterating on ideas is about refining and polishing and final editing and that sort of thing, right? Or revising, combining. So it's interesting that the previous module on idea synthesis and then iteration, both of them can come from both left and right-brained places, perspectives, kind of, depending on how you're approaching them. So flow, oh, here's a deer. A couple of deer. Hi. Sometimes when you're in the flow, you just have this experience and you just go with it, That's cool. Wow. Nice to see that. Anyways, as I was saying, so the topic of flow, there's a lot of science behind the topic of flow. It's a well-studied state of consciousness, or range of states of consciousness. And some of the qualities of the flow state would be, one is enjoyment. It's enjoyment for its own sake. It's not about necessarily what result is coming from what you're doing, but you're doing it so engaged with it that you're enjoying the process itself. It can even be an ecstatic or a euphoric state. It could be described sometimes by people who enter into flow as a transcendent state. Feelings of at one-ment with the process of what's happening and the world. And so it's a form of cognition that's very different than many of the modes we spend our time in that involve our psychic energy turning in on itself. So, mosquito is less pleasant than a deer. When your psychic energy turns in on itself, you become self-conscious. You become very aware of the passage of time, and a lot of energy is spent in limiting but not reversing psychic entropy. It's sort of a survival mode situation where your psychic energy is being leaked in all kinds of ways. One way is it's turned in on itself, so it's in conflict with itself, right? If your mind is focused on concepts around your identity or how you're being seen by others or all of that stuff, then the energy isn't being spontaneously available for the actual task at hand or the actual thought process you would like to focus on. Your attention is split. And then psychic energy is also lost in ruminating on anything that could go wrong, or reasons to be doing something else. So the flow state is characterized by freedom from self-conscious reflective thinking, which means your energy is available for what you're doing, And there's two main counterweights that will throw you off balance from the flow state. So one of them, and this has to do with the challenge skill level. So the challenge skill level balance is about making sure that what you're doing is appropriately matched to your skill level. And that should mean it's appropriately challenging. It's not that it's easy for you necessarily. Although the flow state can be described as a state of ease, it doesn't mean that it doesn't involve skill. So it can actually involve a fluctuation between feeling kind of overwhelmed by the challenge, but then recalibrating so that your skill level is stretched a little bit and you pull back a little bit from the challenge level, and then you're at that balance point. Now, if your challenge is insufficient, it's not challenging enough, then you're in a state of boredom. And boredom also is a state where your psychic energy can mostly just ruminate and fold in on itself and go through habit loops, spending all this energy on habit loops instead of consciousness of the present moment, because what else is there to do? If you're bored, nothing is significant enough, right? And that word significance is going to be, you guessed it, relevant pretty soon. So it's a big topic. What is significant enough to demand your attention? And so another one of the things that is required for entering into the flow state is that the task at hand is important to you or meaningful to you. And that can also mean it's high stakes. So it could mean that you just really care about this particular thing that you're doing. So let's say it's a creative project and you have actual reasons to really care about bringing it into being. And sometimes you might have to remind yourself of why you actually care about bringing it into being. And doing that can help to put you in the mode where your attention is going to be invested in it. And a lot of what controls where your attention goes is not conscious, right? So you can try to use your willpower to focus your attention on something, and you've lived long enough to know by now that that often doesn't work, right? You can't just force your will all the time to pay attention to the things that are apparently necessary to pay attention to reach your supposed goals, right? So the goals have to also be in alignment with what's important enough on a subconscious level and your conscious mind. So you can talk with yourself about that. You can ask yourself questions about the various things that drive you, the things that you wish would drive you. You think about the goals that you imagine are most important to you, that somehow you still end up neglecting. And you can find that there are other things that drive you that you don't identify as someone who is driven by those things. But if you look at your life and you ask yourself, then you are driven by those things. So a great example is that so many people like to think they're not driven by social status. And there's so much malarkey that you have to dish out to yourself to believe that. Very few people are not driven at all by social status. And the whole I'm not driven by social status game often is a social status ploy, right? So asking yourself about what actually matters to you. And it's okay that you're a normal human being who might sometimes care about things like social status. You can actually use that to your advantage without it just being a vain, arrogant, egotistical problem that you have to get rid of. It's more egotistical to pretend it's not there. So another aspect of the flow state is that you lose sense of the passage of time. So that could be an issue. I might forget I wanted this video to be 10 or 15 minutes, and then I might walk around recording for an hour about flow, and that's not the goal right now. The goal is actually 15 to 20 maybe. But the passage of time, and my parents would attest to the fact that when I was a kid, I could be left alone with a few different colors of Play-Doh, and I could be forgotten about for 3 or 4 hours. I could forget about food. I'm just making stuff, and time is not relevant. The passage of time is not relevant. So the mind isn't even really noticing how much time is passing. The mind cares about what's relevant. Your conscious attention moves to what it believes, to what your psyche believes is relevant. And so John Vervaeke also likes to talk a lot about the flow state in his talks on the meaning crisis, awakening from the meaning crisis. And he talks about the topic he calls relevance realization. And relevance realization is sort of a mysterious and profound thing. There is this deep machinery of the mind that activates, that is an interplay between aspects of your conscious mind, your conscious attention, all of these unconscious processes, these types of what we tend to call knowledge, but it's a vague term because there's embodied unconscious knowledge structures that are activating that your conscious mind doesn't necessarily have to understand. It can't analyze all of those processes in real time in order for you to be engaged with the present moment. You don't think about all the aspects of how you're going to move your arm to reach for a glass of water before you pick it up. I'm not thinking about each step that I'm taking right now, and I'm certainly not thinking about what words will compose the next sentence after this one. I have to be engaged with this one right now. In fact, I've lost track of exactly the idea that I'm trying to get across right now, because I got wrapped up in this loop of trying not to think about what the next sentence is going to consist of. So now I have to rediscover my train here. But loss of sense of time, full immersion, a sense of joy and transcendence, self-transcendence, loss of self-consciousness. All of these are aspects of the flow state. So you have to get in alignment with the goals that are appropriately challenging to your current skill level. And what else? Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I don't know if that's how you say his name, but he wrote a couple of books about flow. And so one of them is on the psychology of optimal experience. And again, flow is considered to be a state of optimal experience. Well, he describes what he calls the autotelic personality. And the autotelic personality is that of someone who tends to do a lot of what they do because it's intrinsically rewarding for them. It's not necessarily about how the profit will come later. Profit can be wrapped up in the goals because there might be reasons why you want money to do things in your life, but at the end of the day, the autotelic personality isn't spending a lot of their time focused on goals for the sake of the eventual outcome alone. The autotelic personality is living with a sense of embeddedness in the process, an embeddedness in doing things for their own sake. So that's part of Csikszentmihalyi's outlook on the type of personality that most easily enters into flow states. Now, I was going to record this video and put it in the actual module for week 4. I thought I'd share it here instead because I will iterate on this and I will continue updating the week 4 module, which you guys will have continued access to. So, but next week is the iteration module. So I thought, okay, well, look, I'll try to set the example here and explain and exemplify in real time the topic that we're discussing here. So I've tried to go on this walk and enter into the very state that we're discussing by, for one, putting a narrow constraint on the time frame, so hoping to make it 15 to 20 minutes. And for two, not knowing even where it's going to go, not having it planned, not having it all written out and organized, and demanding then that I come up with it as I go and improvise is, it pushes the challenge of the situation to the edge of my skill, for sure. I could have done better at this in all kinds of ways and articulated flow more concisely and stayed better probably within my time constraint. But the specific goal of having it be 15 to 20 minutes is at least what sets some of these psychological parameters, and it makes it high stakes. And then walking around in public where someone right now can hear me talking to the camera also makes it high stakes, because if I was at home alone recording this, I could say all kinds of ridiculous things and I can pause and restart and edit it out and no one will ever know. Whereas in this mode, even if I did restart it, and you guys would never know, my neighbors know. So, but because it was high stakes, it's calling forth maximal attention. And the whole idea of being in a state of flow is achieving, or what would the word be? Accomplishing what would be called negentropy. And it's basically negative entropy. So entropy is the second law of thermodynamics, right? It's that in a closed system, the physical laws of the universe say that all systems, all matter, all energy will tend towards further states of disorder over time. Now, this is a great mystery to biologists, of course, and cognitive scientists and people thinking about consciousness. There's lots of theories and ways to think about how life exists in the universe. But, of course, dead matter, non-living matter, is governed, and living matter as well, although there is a force at work that is reversing or dissipating entropy in a way that produces temporary order, or it sure seems orderly to us because we're alive. So, for the cells of my body to remain ordered as they are, is for me to be in a state of what I would consider to be order. Now, if we didn't know what cells were doing or what they were capable of, and you just looked up real close, it might not look orderly, but there's a balance at work that is going against the second law of thermodynamics. So, in the psychic realm, the psychological realm, entropy also rules if energy or work isn't put into reversing it. So in physics, work just means exertion of energy, right? Energy has to be exerted. Work has to be done. Food has to be digested for cells to regenerate, right? And so there's a lot of unconscious processes going on in the psyche, just as the body is mostly an unconscious process. And these unconscious processes do a lot to hopefully achieve negentropy, a state where the ruling law of the universe, entropy, is being overcome. And so negentropy is the key to the flow state, because the flow state is the state where psychic energy isn't going to waste through the inner conflicts and cognitive dissonance that result in boredom and anxiety, right? So when your worldview or when your goals and your actions and things aren't congruent with what allows you to enter into flow states, you don't have goals that are non-contradictory and important to you, then you're going to spend a lot of time in boredom. And if your goals are set up in your mind in a way that you can't piecemeal them, you can't chunk them down to something manageable, and they exceed your skill level, then you end up in anxiety. And so in flow, psychic energy isn't being dissipated or turned in on itself in those ways, and that allows your consciousness to be fully engaged with the process that you're involved in right now. So that's the goal, is to organize, to find a harmony in your consciousness that will allow you to put your attention into what you're doing so fully because it actually matters to you, it's actually meaningful, and there's actual stakes involved. So I hope that made sense to you guys. Thanks for bearing with me, going on this nice walk with me, enjoying the beautiful nature. I hope I shared some of these views. There's some wonderful trees on the walk I was just on. But I'm about to be on a loud road, so I will say now, farewell, and please let me know what ideas this sparked for you, and I'll see you on the call real soon.